Sir, this is a private appointment. We don't do casual walkthroughs. Her smile was sweet, but her tone sliced through the air like a polished blade. The kind that didn't need to shout, just wound quietly. She stood tall in red heels, a glossy name badge pinned neatly above her tailored blazer. The kind of woman who sold million-dollar yachts for sport and didn't expect to see him standing there. He blinked slowly. The sun glinted off the yacht behind her, 60 feet of Italian arrogance floating on glass still. Water, the kind of luxury that didn't speak, it whispered. But her words were loud enough for everyone in the showroom to hear. A hush spread. Some turned away. Others leaned closer. The man didn't look like the others here, not in worn gray slacks and a faded linen shirt. No Rolex. No entourage. No diamond-crusted arrogance. Just calm eyes and skin the color of every story that ever started with "You don't belong here." I asked to see the H for 5. His voice was steady, smooth as mahogany. The listing said it was available. "It is," she replied, arching a brow, "for qualified buyers." That word again, qualified. Behind her, champagne glasses clinked as another couple, white, mid-50s, glimmering in beige linen and pearls, laughed quietly, then turned their backs. The woman with the clipboard smiled wider, stepped closer. "If you'd like to make an appointment," she said, emphasizing each word like a school teacher correcting a child, "you can submit a request on the marina's site, but these yachts aren't open to walk-ins, especially on Saturdays." She gestured toward the exit with a graceful flick of the wrist. "Enjoy the rest of your day, sir." The heat pressed down like velvet, soft, but heavy. Inside, he felt the familiar flicker. Not rage, not quite. More like fatigue laced with memory. 1,000 moments just like this in boardrooms, on flights, outside restaurants he owned, all beginning with the same look, the same tone, the same script. He could have left. He could have let this slide. But today, he didn't. He reached into his back pocket, slow, deliberate, and pulled out his phone. No anger. Just that calm again. "I think you'll want to stay nearby," he said. She laughed, a sharp, pretty thing. "I'm not the one being escorted out." "Not yet." He tapped the screen. One call, then slipped the phone back into his pocket. She tilted her head. "Calling someone to vouch for you?" He looked her dead in the eyes. "No, I'm calling someone to finish the deal." That caught her. Just for a second, her lips froze. The showroom stayed silent, thick with breathless tension. A teenage yacht intern in the corner stopped polishing the chrome. Then she scoffed. "Sir, you don't buy yachts with phone calls. This isn't Craigslist." He smiled, just a little, and turned his gaze toward the marina's panoramic glass walls, where sunlight cut across the docks in perfect lines. What he didn't say yet was that the docks had his name on the lease. But that wasn't even the worst part. "Let me take you back to how it all started." He didn't move. Not even when she turned away. Not even when her heels tapped their way back toward the sunlit counter, where a silver iPad sat docked for scanning cards from real clients. He just stood there, hands behind his back, watching the waves lap against polished hulls outside the glass, watching her shoulders square with the confidence of someone who thought the story was over. It wasn't. Because 15 seconds after his call ended, a ripple started across the showroom. First, a man in a gray blazer glanced toward the door. Then a marina assistant whispered something to a security guard. Then the glass doors opened with a hiss, and in walked a woman no one expected. She wore a black suit cut so sharp it could draw blood, red lipstick, no jewelry, just a small leather case under one arm. The saleswoman's voice wavered as she turned. "Excuse Memphis areas for staff and pre-approved clients. I'm counsel for Mr. Thomas King," the woman said. Her voice could slice marble. "Is there a problem here?" Silence, just for a moment. Then someone exhaled sharply near the coffee bar. The intern stopped polishing again. Mr. King didn't move. He hadn't spoken since she arrived. The lawyer stepped forward, heels silent on the showroom floor. "I'd like to know why my client was refused access to a vessel currently listed for private sale, especially considering his firm holds majority equity in Harborview Holdings." Which owns this entire marina complex? Someone gasped audibly. The saleswoman froze, her mouth open, but no words came. Another voice, one deeper, slightly panicked, rose from the back office. It was the floor manager, with Thomas King. That Thomas King. The lawyer didn't blink. She opened her case, pulled out a folder, and laid it on the counter. Inside, a single sheet of paper stamped, notarized, and unmistakable. Ownership confirmation. The crowd didn't just react. It turned. A couple who had left earlier now leaned closer. A woman in pearls pulled out her phone. The teenager whispered, "Oh my God." Even the yacht behind the glass majestic silence seemed to shimmer differently now, as if the space around it had changed, as if it suddenly belonged to someone standing inside the room. The saleswoman stammered, "I didn't know, didn't look mean. I thought." "You thought," the lawyer said smoothly, "that he wasn't someone who could buy the boat, or the dock, or the company leasing it." She tilted her head. "But you were wrong." The lawyer turned toward Thomas. He still hadn't spoken. His gaze lingered on the waves outside. Then finally, slowly, he turned back toward the room. His voice, when it came, was soft, measured. "I was going to walk away." Silence. "I didn't come here to prove anything." He paused. But when disrespect becomes standard, it deserves a response. And that's when the floor manager sprinted over, apologizing, sweating, begging for forgiveness, offering champagne, test sales, whatever he wanted. But Thomas didn't even look at him. He turned back to the glass, watching the sunlight glint off the railings outside. "You're offering access," he said, "now that I don't need it." Nobody said a word. The only sound left was the quiet click of more phones recording. And that was just the beginning. Because what happened after didn't just change her job. It changed the entire marina. The silence didn't break immediately. It stretched long and uncomfortable, the kind that makes people fidget without knowing why. The floor manager kept talking, fast and breathless, his words tumbling over themselves like a man trying to rewind time. We had no idea, Mr. King. If someone had told us, of course we would have. The H-45 is one of our finest." Thomas didn't turn. He just kept looking out the glass. The dock gleamed in the sun. A seagull passed overhead, shadows skimming the water like a question no one wanted to answer. Behind him, the lawyer calmly closed her case. The saleswoman still hadn't moved. Her eyes flicked from Thomas to her manager to the crowd, now thickening near the entrance. A few guests tried to act like they weren't watching. They failed. The tension was no longer private, it had become public spectacle. A social correction unfolding in real time. The intern stepped away from the counter. The woman in pearls whispered to her husband, "He owns the marina." The husband, flustered, nodded, then looked away quickly. And the saleswoman, her perfect posture finally cracked. Her shoulders dropped half an inch. Her voice, when it came, was quieter than before, fragile. "I'm so sorry, Mr. King. I truly didn't know. I treated you unfairly. It was wrong." He still didn't turn, and that silence spoke louder than any rebuke. Because there's something more brutal than shouting. It's being ignored. He finally turned, but not toward her. His eyes swept the room, the interns, the guests, the security guard pretending to adjust his belt. "I wonder," he said softly, "how many others this happened to? Ones who didn't call lawyers, who didn't own the dock." No one answered. No one could. The lawyer cleared her throat gently. "We can arrange the transaction if you still want the yacht." Thomas smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I don't want the yacht," he said. Everyone stared. "I want the policy rewritten." The manager blinked. What policy?" "The invisible one," Thomas replied. "The one that makes someone think a man like me doesn't belong near luxury." And that was it. The shift. A small sentence, calm, measured, but it hit like thunder. The saleswoman looked like she might cry. But Thomas wasn't even looking at her anymore. His eyes were fixed on the folder his lawyer held. "Schedule a meeting," he said. "This marina's public-facing policies are changing. We'll start with anti-bias retraining, then hiring, then promotions. and we'll audit every client interaction from the last 6 months. The manager's jaw opened, but no sound came. You said you didn't know who I was, Thomas added. Let's make sure next time you don't need to. And with that, he walked out. No yacht brochure. No apology accepted. Just calm footsteps on the showroom floor, headed toward the docks he already owned. A silence followed him. Not the silence of awkwardness, the silence of realization. Because everyone in that room, including her, understood they hadn't just watched a man buy power. They'd watched him redefine it. If you'd like to support stories like this, consider subscribing. We've only just begun. Stick around next. I'll show you how one employee flipped sides and leaked a policy email. That changed everything. Before I tell you what she revealed in front of the entire marina board, I know you might be busy. Maybe you've got errands to run, or your mind can only handle so much drama at once. But if stories like this fascinate you, stories where power flips, where silence speaks louder than rage, consider hitting subscribe. You don't want to miss how it all unfolds, because just when the dust seemed to settle, someone unexpected switched sides. Her name was Yelena, just another assistant. No fancy title, no corner office. You wouldn't remember her if you walked past her in the hallway. But she'd been there standing near the champagne tray, watching it all happen. And what she saw that day, it did something to her. Not because she admired Thomas, not yet, but because she recognized the way people changed when they realized who he was. She'd worked there 3 years. 3 years watching how guests were greeted. Who got shown the top-tier yachts? Who got offered champagne? And who didn't? And that day, when Thomas left calm, dignified, already rewriting policy with a few quiet words, something inside her cracked. That night, she stayed late. No one noticed. She wasn't on the floor anymore, but she had admin access, not enough to change prices, but enough to see them. Enough to browse the internal folders marked staff only. And in one folder, she found an email thread. It wasn't labeled anything obvious, just subject lines like client patterns and behavioral profiles, internal only. But when she opened it, her breath caught. A full color chart, column after column, skin tone, attire, accent, profession guessed at check-in, and then recommended tiers, ranging from elite to non-target. And the worst part, it wasn't even subtle. Someone had added a comment. If they ask too many questions, bump to non-target. If they say cash, flag for watch list. Another note, even worse. No test sales without a personal referral if the guest looks urban. Yelena scrolled through names. At the bottom, initials, SS, the saleswoman from earlier. She wasn't just rude. She was following protocol. That night, Yelena didn't sleep. The next morning, she printed the thread. Didn't email it. Didn't leak it online. She walked it straight to HR. No anonymous drop. No black hoodie in a parking garage. Just quiet steps, a shaking hand, and a folder full of rot. And that's where things turned. Because what the marina board did next, it wasn't just about PR. It became a war. A civil war inside their own glass walls. Next up, I'll show you how the leaked emails set off an internal investigation and nearly got Thomas banned from his own marina. They didn't thank her. Not with words. Not with applause. Just a strain. We'll review this from the HR director, followed by a glance to the internal phone line, the kind that doesn't ring unless something big just hit the fan. By lunchtime, the email had been buried under NDA threats. By dinner, Yelena's login credentials were frozen. And by morning, the system had begun fighting back. You see, power doesn't surrender easily, especially when it's embarrassed. The marina board didn't issue a public apology. They didn't call a meeting. They called lawyers, and not Thomas's. They started searching for a technicality, a loophole, a clause, anything to keep the ownership but remove the man. And they found something, a line buried deep in the lease agreement, one written before Thomas even bought in. It read, all leaseholders must maintain public brand harmony with the operating entity's luxury code. Vague, purposely vague, but dangerous because it could mean anything. And now, they claimed Thomas's public presence, the story going viral, the video clips, the The tension in the showroom was disrupting harmony. They filed a motion, behind closed doors, to review his ownership. Not revoke, not yet, just review. That word again, so calm, so polite, and so pointed. When Thomas heard, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't storm the boardroom. He just asked a question. Who submitted the motion? At first, no one would say. Then someone slipped him the name. It wasn't the saleswoman. It wasn't the floor manager. It was the marina's general counsel, a man Thomas had met only once. And during that meeting, he remembered the exact words. You're not our typical partner, but this could be good press. Not valued partner, not long-term vision, just good press. Thomas sat in his office for a long time. No music, no phone, just the sound of the marina outside and the knowledge that the very structure he'd invested in was trying to cut him out of its frame. But this time, he wasn't playing defense. He called his lawyer, asked her to gather 3 things. The original email Yelena had uncovered, footage from the showroom, sent with timestamps, and the marina's own guest metrics quietly gathered from their CRM. If they wanted a fight based on brand harmony, he'd give them one, but not the kind they expected, because harmony isn't about silence. It's about what happens when you control the story. And Thomas was just getting started. Next, I'll show you how Thomas flipped their own metrics against them and turned a courtroom into a lesso. And they'd never forget. He didn't argue. He didn't write a speech. He submitted data. Because if they wanted to talk brand harmony, he'd show them what disharmony really looked like. The motion hearing was held in a sleek, windowless boardroom, the kind designed to make expensive people feel even more important. Polished glass table, leather chairs, a bowl of untouched fruit in the center, as if any of them actually ate during meetings like this. Thomas walked in alone. No entourage, no legal army, just his lawyer, a binder, and a laptop. The general counsel who filed the motion was already seated, smug, relaxed, ready to spin their narrative that Thomas's presence was becoming controversial, that it might alienate their core clientele, that perhaps this ownership model wasn't the right fit. But before he could speak, Thomas opened the binder. Page 1. CRM heat map guest movement inside the marina. Color-coded, labeled. A direct match to the profiles in the email Yelena had uncovered. He turned the page. Page 2. Breakdown of yacht inquiries by client name, skin tone, accent, attire, and whether a test sale was offered. Page 3. Approval rates. In bold font, white male clients received approval 78% of the time. Black clients, 12%. No one in the room spoke. Page 4. Viral reach. Over 5.4 million views across TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts. The clip of Thomas being dismissed had gone international. Below that, brand mentions positive and negative. Below that, emails from prospective buyers supporting Thomas's stance, with subject lines like, "Finally, someone said it. I was turned away too, glad someone stood up." The general counsel cleared his throat. This isn't about race, Mr. King. It's about disruption. Thomas leaned forward. And what, exactly, do you think disrupted your brand? No answer. He didn't wait. He pulled out the final page. A quote from their own marketing brochure. "We believe luxury should be inclusive, intuitive, and inspiring." He paused. Read it again. Inclusive. Let that sit. Then he added, "So tell me, is it disruptive when someone calls out a lie?" Silence. The board shifted in their seats. One reached for water. Another finally spoke. "Mr. King, are you requesting action?" Thomas looked him straight in the eye. "I'm requesting clarity." He slid the binder across the table. "If you're going to define harmony as silence, then own that. Say it. Let every potential investor know you only want quiet money, quiet partners, quiet injustice." He waited. No one moved. So, Thomas said, "What is harmony?" And that was the moment everything cracked, because no one had an answer. And sometimes, no answer is the answer. Next up, I'll show you how the boardroom backlash spilled into public and how the woman who once shamed him tried to save her own name by switching sides. It didn't stay private. By the end of the week, someone leaked the slides. Not Thomas, not his lawyer, just someone. Maybe from the board, maybe from a janitor's forgotten USB drive. But suddenly, the binder's contents, the bias charts, the C or M heat maps, the test sale discrimination stats were all over LinkedIn, Reddit, even Twitter. Yacht, a hashtag born out of wealth and quiet humiliation. It trended in 6 countries. And the headlines? Luxury marina faces discrimination probe after viral clip. Data leak exposes bias at multi-million-dollar dock. Yacht saleswoman silent as former client turns owner. And that last one, that one hit a nerve. Because that saleswoman, she wasn't just watching the story anymore. She was in it. Her name had leaked too. Her photo. Even a clip where she smirked at Thomas while saying, "These cost more than your yearly income, sir." It didn't age well. She tried to stay quiet, deleted her Instagram, switched her LinkedIn to private. But silence, in the age of virality, is gasoline. And one morning, just 2 weeks after the board hearing, she walked into her manager's office pale, tight-lipped, and desperate. "I want to talk to him," she said. The manager blinked. "To who?" "Mr. King." He raised a brow. "Why would he talk to you?" "I have something he'll want to see." Thomas didn't take the call. Not at first, but curiosity is persistent. So when her email came in subject line, "Something you missed," he opened it. Inside, an image. One line from an old HR memo. "Avoid hiring candidates with urban accents or ethnic hairstyles for front-facing roles." Below it, her message. "I stayed silent for too long. But this I couldn't ignore. They buried it, you should know." It wasn't redemption. Not yet. But it was a crack, a shift, proof that the very people who once enforced the system were starting to turn on it. Thomas didn't reply. Not with words. But that afternoon, he made a decision. He scheduled a public town hall open mic, live stream, no pre-screened questions. At the marina, inside the same glass showroom. And she showed up. Not with makeup, not with a script, just a file folder and shaking hands. She walked to the mic, cleared her throat, and began with 4 words no one expected. "I was part of it." The crowd held its breath. Because now, it wasn't just about Thomas. It was about all the ways silence had been sold as sophistication. And that was just the first confession. Coming up next, what happened when employees started speaking out on record, and the CEO had to choose between punishment or partnership. She wasn't the only one. After the town hall, more came forward. A security guard who had been told to monitor the urban clients more closely. A customer service rep who once flagged a guest because he wore sneakers with gold chains. Even a former manager, older, retired, who sent in a signed letter that read, "We didn't just tolerate the bias, we trained it. We dressed it up in client intuition and called it elegance. I'm ashamed." By the end of the week, over a dozen testimonies had surfaced. Some anonymous, some shaking on camera, but all telling the same truth. It wasn't one bad actor. It was a culture. A silent architecture of exclusion built beneath polished wood and chilled champagne. Thomas watched it unfold from his office above the docks. Not in triumph, not in vengeance, but in something closer to sorrow. Because when a system rots, the blame doesn't stop at the obvious villains. It spreads to the quiet bystanders, the polite shrugs, the just following protocol emails. And that's when his lawyer asked the question, "What do you want to do now?" He could have fired half the staff, forced resignations, turned the marina into a PR war machine, a public cleansing ritual. But he didn't. He said something else. "People broke this place in silence. Let's rebuild it in honesty." He didn't want a purge. He wanted a reset. He announced 3 things. First, a full audit of every customer rejection in the last 2 years. Second, an anonymous portal for employees to submit experiences without fear. And third, the most controversial of all, he offered everyone who spoke out a seat at the new policy table, even the saleswoman. There was backlash, comments online that said he was too soft, emails from investors urging him to clean house, not host therapy. But Thomas knew something they didn't. You can't fix a culture by burning it down and hiring new faces. You fix it by forcing the old faces to look in the mirror, to name what they've been part of, to own it. Only then could the marina change. And over time, it did. The yacht inquiry form updated. No more casual style fields. No more profile notes. Sales scripts rewritten. New line at the top. Luxury is not a language. It's a welcome. And the clients, they noticed. A new type of guest began walking through the glass doors. Not just billionaires with boat shoes and last names on buildings, but teachers, artists, athletes, engineers. Diverse, unexpected, curious. Some just wanted to look. Some bought, but all were treated like they belonged. And the woman who once told Thomas this isn't a sightseeing spot, she became head of staff training. Because sometimes the loudest lesson comes from someone who once got it wrong. But not everyone liked the new order, and someone from the shadows still wanted Thomas gone. Next, I'll show you how a secret vote nearly took the marina back and the unexpected figure who stopped it cold. It started quietly. A private message. No name. Just a burner email and 5 words. Watch the board next Thursday. Thomas read it twice. He'd been here before. Misinformation, whispers, half-baked threats. But something about this felt different. He forwarded it to his lawyer. Then, quietly, checked the calendar. The board had a routine review scheduled for the very Thursday. No agenda, no press. Just a simple line. Annual alignment review with equity holders. That's when the lawyer started digging. What she found wasn't routine. It was a clause, another buried line, like the one they tried to use before. This one said, in the event of organizational misalignment, a special equity vote may be called to reassign operating control to a stabilizing trustee. Translation: if the majority of the board felt Thomas's actions had to stabilize the brand, they could vote to push him out, not remove his ownership, but strip him of operating control. Take the keys from the driver's seat and hand them to someone else. It was subtle, legal, quiet, and it was already in motion. Thomas wasn't surprised. The changes he'd made, the audits, the open forums, the visible diversity, had rattled some of the older investors. Not all of them were ready for this new kind of luxury. But he was ready. He didn't campaign. He didn't beg. He prepared one statement, short, precise, and backed with numbers. When the day came, the boardroom was colder than usual. Polished, polite. The general counsel from before sat near the center, still smug, still quiet. They moved quickly. Formalities, minutes, then a motion. To vote on reassignment of operational control due to leadership misalignment. Thomas stood. No speech. He said, just one fact. He slid a folder across the table. Inside, growth. Bookings up 27%. Diverse client base up 44%. Employee satisfaction measured anonymously had doubled. He looked at the board. You want harmony, he said. These are the numbers harmony brings. Silence. Then the vote began. Hands went up. 1, 2, 3. Then, a pause. Eyes shifted toward a seat near the end of the table. A late arrival. Someone who had missed the last 2 meetings. An older man. Tan suit. Cane resting by his knee. He cleared his throat and said, I vote no. The room froze. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to, because that vote tipped the scale. Majority blocked. Motion denied. Thomas stayed. After the meeting, the man approached him slowly. You don't remember me, he said, but I remember you. Thomas blinked. I was there. First week you toured this marina years ago. You asked more questions than anyone I'd seen. They said you'd never make it past the waiting list. He smiled. But I watched you. You didn't chase prestige. You built presence. That's rare. Thomas extended his hand. Thank you. The man shook it. Don't thank me. Just keep proving them wrong. But even that vote wasn't the final challenge. Because next, the media came for Thomas, directly digging into his past, looking for a flaw. And they found something. Something he thought he buried years ago. Coming up, Thomas's old life. an unpaid debt, and how the truth nearly destroyed everything he'd rebuilt. They called it a character investigation, but it was really a takedown. After the failed vote, the story shifted. The media didn't care about policy audits anymore. They wanted dirt, and someone gave it to them. Within 48 hours, 3 headlines appeared. Marina owner's quiet bankruptcy from 2009 surfaces. Thomas King once sued over missing investor funds. Luxury's new face has old skeletons. He knew the stories. He lived them. Back when he was 26, running a tech startup out of a warehouse. Back when ambition outpaced infrastructure. They weren't crimes, but they weren't clean either. He'd raised capital too fast, trusted the wrong co-founder, missed filings, lost money, took the blame. Eventually, he paid back every cent. But that part didn't make the articles. The internet doesn't print redemption, only scandal. Now, reporters camped outside the marina. Paparazzi stalked his team. Even clients were getting spooked. One yacht deal fell through. 2 investors paused funding, and board members began emailing again, subtly urging him to take a leave, to let things cool down. But Thomas didn't hide. He called a press conference. No PR agency, no filters, just a podium, a marina skyline, and an honest man who refused to be defined by mistakes. He stepped up to the mic. "I'm not perfect," he began. The crowd leaned in. "I built my life on risk, on saying yes when the odds said no, and sometimes I lost." He paused, looked down, then back up. "But what I never lost was responsibility." He laid it bare. The bankruptcy, the lawsuit, the nights he couldn't sleep wondering if he'd blown his only chance. "I paid every investor back, not because the court made me, because my name mattered." He looked directly into the cameras. "If that disqualifies me from owning luxury, then maybe the definition of luxury needs to change." Silence, then a ripple. Applause. Not thunderous, but real. Grounded. It spread slowly, like courage. The next day, the tide shifted. A tweet went viral. They tried to cancel him for bouncing back. "I want 10 leaders like this." Then another. "You want perfect? Or do you want proof that resilience builds legacy?" Brands that had distanced themselves reconnected. Investors who paused called again. But more than that, guests kept arriving. More than ever. Because Thomas hadn't sold them a yacht. He'd offered them something rarer. Truth. And in a world addicted to polish, truth is the new luxury. But just when it seemed he had made it through, a visitor showed up with a case file from 17 years ago. And what they carried wasn't just about Thomas. It was about his father. Coming up, a family secret buried beneath the docks, and the final twist no one saw coming. She didn't knock. She just stood there early morning, fog still curling off the water, holding a leather file that looked older than the marina itself. "I'm not press," she said. "I'm probate." Thomas narrowed his eyes. "Probate?" She nodded. "Your father left something behind, technically unfinished." That stopped him cold. His father had died 17 years ago, before the startups, before the suits, before the yachts and lawsuits and headlines. Before any of this, he barely spoke about him, not because of shame, but because the silence felt cleaner than the grief. The woman handed him the file. Inside, a hand-drawn map, to signatures, and a single-page contract unsigned, undated, titled King and Son Marine Holdings Land Option Agreement. Thomas stared at it. "I don't understand." She took a breath. "Your father tried to buy this marina once, long before the investors. Long before it became Harborview. It wasn't called that back then, just Bay 9. He looked at the date in the corner. 2001. The year everything changed. The year his father came home with oil-stained hands and empty promises, saying, they pulled the deal. The year their lights went out 3 times. The year his father's back gave out, and he worked through it anyway. The year Thomas stopped believing in luck. She pointed to the second signature. "You see who that is?" Thomas read it again. It was the same man who'd submitted the secret board vote weeks ago. The one trying to oust him quietly. The man had known, for years, that Thomas's father once stood at the gates of this same property and got turned away. And now, his son owned it. Not just in equity, but in full circle defiance. But that wasn't the twist. The twist was the note scrawled in the margin, in his father's handwriting. If we don't get it now, one day my boy will. Thomas sat down. The paper shook in his hands. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't justice. It was prophecy. He thought he built this empire alone, but here it was proof that someone laid bricks before him, even when they were being knocked down. He looked up at the lawyer. Why now? She shrugged. Some debts take years to collect, some generations. He didn't speak again for a while. He just walked down to the dock, stood where his father once had, and let the wind carry the silence between them. But there was one last decision to make, because now Thomas didn't just own the marina. He owned the original land rights contract, which meant he could erase the name Harborview forever. Coming up, the final act, what Thomas chose to rename the marina and the legacy it now carries. He waited a week, not because he was unsure, but because some moments require space. Time to breathe, to weigh what a name really means. The marina's legal team had already prepared everything: press releases, domain names, logos. They expected him to rename it after himself. King Marina. It would have been easy, fitting, expected. But Thomas wasn't interested in legacy as ego. He was interested in correction. One morning, just before dawn, he walked the perimeter. From the dry docks to the slipway, he touched the cold metal of the gates where his father once stood carrying dreams and paperwork no one ever took seriously. And he thought, what would have made him proud? Not revenge, not headlines, just the feeling of walking into a place and finally being seen. So when the launch event came, press gathered, cameras prepped, champagne chilled, he stepped onto the podium and held the new sign in his hands. One clean, dark wood panel, gold lettering, no logos, no slogan, just 3 words: Bay 9 Landing. There was a pause. Some looked confused. Others recognized it instantly. And Thomas spoke. This was never just about me. It never even started with me. It started with a man who wore coveralls, who smelled like diesel and dreams, and who once believed the system would let him in. He paused. They didn't, not then. He held the sign higher. But today we rewrite the gate. Applause followed. Slow at first, then rising. Not because of spectacle, but because something finally felt complete. In the days after, the change rippled. The new signage went up. The website rebranded. Staff began telling the story not just of yachts and deals, but of where the name came from. Who built it first? Who was denied? And who came back? Clients noticed. But more importantly, so did the community. Boatmakers, young kids on field trips, local families who once believed luxury meant not for you. Now, they walked in, or welcomed in. And Thomas, he kept a photo on his desk of Bay 9, circa 2001. Black and white, faded, with one man in the corner, clipboard in hand. Head held just a little too high for someone about to be turned away. His father. And beneath the photo, that handwritten line from the old contract: if we don't get it now, one day my boy will. He did, and he made sure everyone else could too. Because true power isn't just changing the rules, it's changing the door they're written on. But the echo of Bay 9 Landing will last a lifetime.